There we go.
I gotta get it on inside that strength.
Technical difficulties.
A joy this morning.
Yeah, it's always full. Those highway lights make me feel so safe. I chase the lightning, I got soaked in the rain.
Welcome to Innovative Strategies with Bill HAASE. This is a show designed to help people with their business and personal financial literacy, but not the way you've known. It's not your grandpa's financial literacy, as Bill uses his 30 plus years in the financial industry to stretch your financial box from, about a 30,000 foot view of things. Bill and his guests have helped hundreds of clients achieve and surpass their financial goals. Of course, if you have questions, email Bill at billhaase.com. That's Bill at BILLHAASE.com, or reach out to him at 216thenet@gmail.com. Of course, follow us on all of the social media platforms out there. 216 the Net YouTube. We're looking for 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe, ring the bell there. Follow Bill on Facebook at Bill HAASE as well. Today, we are talking about Protect Your Baby with Josh Joel from Stratton Law, and he'll be right back. We had some technical difficulty, Bill, getting him in,
Yes.
But we'll give it a.
We're working on it.
We'll get him. We'll get him here. He's in the green room. We just have to get him here. So, all right.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Happy National Pizza Day.
Hey, it's National Pizza Day, huh?
Yeah, gotta go out and get that pizza.
Are you you're from Chicago, but are you a Chicago or New York style?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I kind of more of a New York style myself.
Okay.
I am from New Jersey.
Yeah.
So I do love the bagels and the pizza out there, but there's plenty of good pizza right here in Chicagoland, no doubt about it. But yeah, we're protect your baby. We're going to talk about this today. We're going to bring on Josh Joel. He's not an ambulance chaser.
Yeah.
Josh specializes in employment law. He makes legal issues into non-issues, and let me tell you, you need to know about this kind of stuff. Starting a business and getting going from the get-go, because things can turn around and bite you in the butt, a year or 2 or 3 years down the road, because you didn't do things and set things up properly and legally.
Yeah.
It's good for entrepreneurs, for startups, scaling companies. Each step of the way, there's going to be some different legal aspects that you need to deal with. You need to be aware of.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, most entrepreneurs, if you're not a lawyer, you don't know this stuff. And just like if you're not a financial guy, you don't know how to read your sheets.
Right.
You need. We always bring this up, right? You gotta have professionals. You gotta have experts in their field to help you grow your business and get to those each step in each levels. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to help you understand that and try to help you get to those next levels with as little amount of pain as possible and as short amount of time as possible. So we are trying to. There's many different ways to arrange things and get things set up.
Yeah.
But Josh will be joining us. He's from the Stanton Law Group down in Atlanta, of all places.
I think I heard him tweak in.
Yeah, here he's coming in.
There he is. Look at that.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, there I am.
Welcome.
Technology is fun.
Yeah, technology. We love it. We love it. But welcome, Josh, joining in. I've already kind of done an introduction for you, but if you want me to, I can do it all over again.
Well, I always like when people talk about me, so you're welcome to talk about me again.
Well, I started off by, I was talking a little bit about I'm starting a new business. So, and you and I kind of discussed this, and I said, well, what should I be doing? Should I be doing an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, joint venture, sole prop, doing DBA, doing business as, and you rightfully pointed out, well, that's not what I do. That's more of a CPA's question than a legal lawyer question, correct?
Yeah, to some degree. Oftentimes when folks come to us and say they're starting out a new business, my view of a lawyer generally, and this is probably not the most popular opinion amongst most lawyers, is that our job is really not to come in and complicate things with respect to legal issues, and to really formulate pragmatic solutions. So I like to tell people that you should figure out what you want to accomplish and where you want to get. Start with the end in mind. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Start with the end in mind. Where do you want to go? What do you want to accomplish? And let us help you get there. And so when I get that question of, hey, what kind of entity should I set up? To me, that's a business question that has to do with your oftentimes with your financial situation, your tax situation. Who are you going to be involved with? Should it be a partnership? Should it be an S corp, a C corp, all these different things. And then I can help walk you through the yin and the yang in terms of which one to set up. But ultimately, I think the biggest issue is going to be your tax liabilities and how to set that up. And therefore, I do often punt that question back to the financial professionals.
Yeah, I love the good point you bring up about you're there to help move things along. Most people, when they think of lawyers, they think that's where I go to after the shit has hit the fan. And so we can say that because this is internet radio. So but that's the way most people, and I'm included. It's how I think. I don't go to a lawyer until I absolutely need one. Why would I go to a lawyer before I need one?
Right. But, we often tell our clients and people who come to us that any small business or a scaling startup or anyone who is trying to grow a business, who's constantly picking up the phone to call an attorney, they got a problem. And any attorney who it's like kind of like when a kid is growing up and at some point you got to cut the apron strings, and a good education for your children is going to be raising your children to get to a place where they can be independent and on their own. And so when it comes to having any sort of business advisor, there are certainly things that are important for folks to reach out to their attorneys and know when to reach out to an attorney and when not to reach out to an attorney. But if you're constantly picking up the phone to call a lawyer, you've lost the game. And your lawyer should be someone who is educating you and teaching you what you need to know so that you can be on your own and not have to spend your time, waste your time with legal fees and lawyers who tend to complicate things. And frankly, we've earned our reputation.
Well, every industry I think has earned their own reputation. I'm in sales, and we definitely have our own reputation.
Yeah,
hence we now have the door stoppers and the gatekeepers and the whatnot, whatever, and the people who automatically you open a door to walk into a business to see if you can help them, and they look at you and go, "Get out." I don't even want to know what you're doing. I don't want to know what unless you're buying something for me. I don't need you in my shop right now.
Well, there's a lot of truth to the fact that they say, everyone is in sales, and believe it or not, attorneys are also in sales. And
it is true.
That's the bottom line. We're all selling something. And if we believe or we're passionate about what we're selling and we care about what we're selling, then we certainly will do a better job because we're actually helping people. And, if we think that we're just providing a service or doing something and we're not value driven or mission driven in terms of the work that we do, then yeah, we're just selling, it's like what are the snake oil salesmen, right? But yeah. if we care about what we do, we're passionate about what we do, and we think we're actually making a difference to the world in what we do, then yeah, we should be passionate about selling what we do.
Well, that's a requirement actually to be on this show, although it's an unwritten requirement. Yeah. But you need to be an expert in your field, and you need to care and be passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah,
because those are the only kind of people I want to work with.
That's correct. Josh, you've been practicing law for how long now?
So I graduated, I guess, in 2015.
Okay.
So I actually went a little bit late to law school when I was 27 years old with 3 kids already. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting trip. And so I went to law school and just did a rocket start on my career to get me where I wanted to be today, and really proud of it.
That's awesome.
And your main focus is?
Yes, I'm a business lawyer, but my main specialty is employment law. That's what I specialize in, and I work with scaling companies to really proactively resolve a lot of HR issues, employment issues. But kind of as an extension of that, I develop a trusted relationship with my clients, and then they tend to come to me for pretty much all their legal needs. So we can really service folks from starting up to shutting down, soup to nuts, everything in between when it comes to a smaller growing business.
Now, out of curiosity, and sorry to steal the show, Bill, but out of curiosity, at 27, and then you roll into this. I mean, as a kid, did you dream about being a business attorney? You know what I'm saying? Is that something, or was it something that
Getting that
happened?
he started later in life before he even came up.
Right. Well,
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you know, well, put it this way: I have a Jewish mom. You know, any kid who's got a Jewish mom knows there's got to be a doctor and an accountant and a lawyer in the family. And we had a dentist, we have an
You had to
accountant.
pick the one that wasn't taken.
Right, exactly. And so, you know, so I kind of had to fill those shoes. And so, if you ask my mom that question, I guarantee you, she's listening to this. She will say that, "Oh, my dream for Josh was he was going to be a lawyer from day one." If you ask me, I will say, "No, that's not what I wanted to do." And I really kind of found it a bit later. Recognizing that's really where my skill set was. And of course, mothers know best. And she was actually right all along.
that's right.
So behind a counter at 7-Eleven just wasn't working for you.
That's not quite. It was, you know,
Mom was not going to be happy with that one. And hi, Mom.
Yeah, exactly.
And welcome, Sally. Thanks for joining us. And
Gary,
always
from
love seeing you.
Singapore. Yeah,
Gary from Singapore is back. Love it. Love having you on here, Gary. Really.
Just for the record, free Slurpees are not quite as exciting as free legal services. So.
It's been a long time since I've had a Slurpee, but I have fond memories.
I'm here in Atlanta, and we actually, believe it or not, do not have 7-Eleven in Atlanta. So anytime we come up north or go anywhere outside of Georgia, 7-Eleven is stop number one. So
really,
yeah.
What do you have to make up for it?
We have a place called QT, Quick Trip. So,
QT.
Yeah, it's not
quite time in my book, but okay.
Yeah, it is not 7-Eleven. Let's put it like that.
So let's get back on topic. What are some of the things like you talk about? You work with startups, you work with entrepreneurs, but I mean, and I say I'm starting a business. I'm starting my third business. I'm just getting started in that, putting a team together. But I don't think about, okay, what are the legal needs that I have? What are the things legally that I should be thinking about or concerned about? That just never crosses my mind.
Correct.
Starting up a business, right?
Yeah. And I would say that you are probably in the camp of about 95% of small business owners and people who are starting businesses. Legal issues are not on their mind. And I will be honest with you, legal issues should not be on your mind because you should have a trusted advisor who can take those worries off your mind. But the reality is that, folks are when they're starting a business, what they really want to focus on is growing and scaling their business. They don't want to be, and frankly, earning money. Else, why are you doing this? And so, as I said before, when a small business owner or someone starting a business is constantly calling a lawyer, they've got a serious problem. However, on the other hand, if you don't address and don't think about a lot of the legal issues that do come up and proactively mitigate your risk when it comes to legal problems, then I will guarantee you that you will have a lot of problems down the road. So I'm, for example, my practice, 50-50, 60-40 litigation and proactive counseling. And all the litigation stuff that I'm doing, which is frankly, from my perspective, that's what pays my kids' tuition and pays my bills. That's the stuff that it results from people who did not proactively think about the legal issues that might come up when they were building their business and didn't have a trusted advisor who was going to help them work through that and know how to proactively resolve those problems before they became problems. And, if you get to a point where you're already in the dispute, or you're already at a point where you're fighting with someone else, you've lost the game, you've lost the battle already. And
yeah,
so,
I know business owners that are constantly in contact with their lawyer, and that is an issue. And sometimes we call that having a bad client, and sometimes you have to fire bad clients. But it's, and I know business owners that just are not aware of the pitfalls of running into legal issues until it slaps them in the face.
Right.
And at that point, it could be too late.
Yeah. It also, by the way, might be a bad lawyer, not just a bad client.
There are those.
Yeah, many.
But I like how you also work with, you don't work with just the business side, but you can help them out with the personal side. Because I do the same thing. When I work with business owners, typically that flows into working with them on the personal side as well, because you need that balance. You have to have your personal life in order and your business life in order for things, and so things can flow freely and try and reduce all that stress that can come about because as a business owner, you wear a lot of hats.
That's correct. And the big difference between working, I used to be at a big law firm working for big corporations. And I think the fundamental difference between working in a big law firm with big companies and working with the mid-sized and smaller businesses is that for someone who owns his own business, a business owner, an entrepreneur, it is a part of his life. It is a part of his soul. And a small business owner invests his money, but more importantly, his heart, his sweat, his blood into his business. And if you don't approach things from a holistic standpoint and you are removed from the real world of what it's like to actually run a business with, unfortunately, a lot of lawyers are sitting in an ivory tower and don't, up in their penthouse law firms, not fully understanding what it's like to actually take risk and build a business and to think like a business owner. And so that's a big issue. And therefore, you're 100% right. I believe that any business advisor, especially an attorney, has to recognize that at the end of the day, for a small business owner, if they have a legal issue on their plate, that's going to, whether it's a problem, litigation, or they have an employee that's causing them issues, they don't know how to get rid of them without major legal risk, or if they have any sort of issue, that is the biggest issue that they are facing in their life right now. And it can really affect their mental health. It can affect their mental well-being, and to be able to have that human sensitivity and the emotional side, that sensitivity is absolutely critical for an attorney to really work with small businesses effectively.
Well, and that leads to costing money. You're making poor decisions, and that's, we were saying, if you can afford to do it wrong the first time, then you can afford to do it right. But so yeah, that's an interesting prospect, and that's why we call this show "Protecting the Baby," because all business owners, that's their baby.
Oh yeah.
And you're right. It is blood, sweat, tears, and all that. And what are we going into the business for? Well, we're pretty much there to make money, right?
Right.
And to be our own boss, and to have be able to make our own choices in life instead of being directed by a corporation or other people higher up and just telling you what to do. That's fine for some folks, and they thrive in that environment, and that's great. But for those of us who want to go out and take control of our own lives, build businesses, we have that passion, right? We have that dream, we have that idea that we want to bring into play. But you got to be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's protect your baby, and how do you do that? Many different ways.
Well,
that's 100% correct. And at the end of the day, like you said, we do as small business owners, we do really invest ourselves into that. And so, and another angle of it, by the way, is that it does create an emotional attachment to some of the things that go on. Especially, I see it with the employment issues that come up when folks have an employment dispute, or certainly a partnership dispute. There is high emotions running in that situation, and sometimes it's actually the lawyer's job as a counselor to take a step back and be a little more objective and say to the client, have difficult conversations to say, hey, you've got to recognize that you need to look at this issue as a business problem, not a personal problem, or a business problem, not a legal problem. Mm-hmm. And then you can actually get over the hump to be able to resolve something in a way that it's not going to cost you a lot of money. The big, heavy duty, expensive litigation, especially around employment issues, results from emotional charge from both sides.
Yeah, when you get emotional about it all, things can fall apart very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. And we have a great question from Sally that I'd like to.
Sure.
You want to read that?
So Sally asks, when getting ready to hire, what are the top 3 things a small business owner should be considering from a legal standpoint? For example, the value and necessity of having an employee handbook, and can you just create that for it to be legit, or does it have to be created by a lawyer? Background checks, run them or not? Just examples of what I'm asking.
Sure. So there's a lot to be answered in that question, and I will take 3 steps back on that, and talk about when a small business is starting out and they're looking to start hiring employees. What do they need to be thinking about? What are the first things they need to be thinking about, and how they need to be addressing it? Now, most lawyers will look at this as a legal issue and will tell you that you've got to be thinking about your wage and hour practices. You've got to be thinking about your restrictive covenants, non-competes, these kind of things. I think even before we get there, we need to define the risks and we understand that most small businesses, especially if they're just starting to hire, don't have a heck of a lot of capital to go and invest in legal services, and therefore we have to measure the various risks. As you're correctly pointing out, Sally, you have to measure the legal risks to understand what are the gaps that need to be closed first. And for every business, that's going to be a little bit different. But from taking a very kind of generalized view as to the top 3 things a small business owner, a lot is going to depend on the industry that you're working in. What is your currency? What is the value of your business? Are you in the tech industry where the value is your intellectual property? Are you in sales where the value is your client relationships and customer relationships? And so a lot depends on the specific nature of the business that you're talking about. However, as a general principle, the very first thing that people need to be thinking about when they're hiring employees is to make sure that they understand what an employee actually is. The biggest mistake that I see a lot of startups making, and underlies a lot of issues, is they think that they can just call someone an independent contractor because they don't want to have the liabilities of an employee. They don't want to have to, do tax withholding.
1099 them, right?
Just 1099. And the classic thing, I have a 1099. I get this all the time. I have a 1099 employee, and I say, just stop right there. There is actually no such thing as a 1099 employee. By definition, a 1099 is an independent contractor, and you can call it whatever you want to call it, but the government doesn't care. The government, these are legal definitions and you have to fit your specific situation into the correct legal definitions. You can't just have a contract that says independent contractor. I don't think so. You can't make it up, right? And if you do make it up, which is what most people do, I'm just going to have an independent contractor. But in reality, the law views that person as an employee. You're going to face a lot of problems down the road because you think you didn't have to address certain legal issues that had to be addressed because the law views that person as an employee, not just with respect to taxes, but also with, for example, the biggest one is going to be issues of overtime pay, minimum wage, the federal wage and hour rules, your liabilities with respect to what the things that quote independent contractor employee does. Is it possible to have independent contractors instead of employees? And is it a good idea? Very often it is a very, very good idea because it does minimize your liabilities, but you have to set it up right. You have to make sure that an independent contractor is an independent contractor and not an employee. And therefore that's the number one. And I can speak a little more about how to do that, but that's the basics. That's the very first thing that I would talk about. And then the other is going to be, protecting your interests, restrictive covenants, which we can unpack as well.
Yeah, and so we're using all these legal terms now, and,
Sure.
and some of us, including myself, don't always understand the legal terms. I've had to take exams that are written by lawyers, which I'm not sure I understand that whole process.
Right.
How does a lawyer write an exam for financial
Right.
side of things? But we do mix and match there. So there's a lot of things here for a small business owner to think about when you're taking that first step and hiring that first employee. And then there's different levels, right? Is there a 5 or 10 or 15 employees? Then the rules start changing.
That's correct.
We have 88% of the small businesses in this country, or all businesses in the country, 88% of them are 20 employees and under.
Correct.
So when does that rule kind of change? When I hire my first one, to what number comes up next?
Sure. So here are the numbers that small businesses need to be thinking about. Now, I know we're speaking to a kind of generalized audience over here all over the world, and therefore I want to keep it very general and recognize. Yeah. And by the way, got to give the standard, caveat. This is not legal advice that I'm giving, but just educating on the law. But the thing you need to be thinking about, first of all, every state is different in the United States. Many states have state-specific employment laws where these thresholds kick in at a different stage. And for example, I'm sure that Illinois, where you are, has a lot more restrictive employment laws and state-based employment laws than Georgia, where I am, where basically there is nothing, right, on the state level. And so, number one, as a general principle, this is not a political statement, but a business statement. If you are in a state that has a history of having a more liberal political environment, you're generally going to probably have more state-based employment laws. If you are in a state which is, the more classic business-friendly, more conservative states, like in the Southeast and some of in the Southwest, you're going to have less state-based laws. So that's a general principle. So if you're in New York, if you're in New Jersey, California, Illinois, Connecticut, these kinds of states, just be aware, and I'm not speaking about them because I'm not, I don't want to go to state specific.
Right.
Be aware you need to check your state's individual laws. So, but from a federal standpoint, which is applies across the country, no matter where you are, the numbers you need to be thinking about are one, which is your first employee, what you need to do before you hire that person. The next number you need to be thinking about is 15. Once you get to employee number 15 is when the vast majority of federal employment law obligations kick in. That's going to be discrimination laws, harassment laws, sexual harassment, disability accommodations. All of the federal kind of employment laws are 15. The next threshold, skipping one, which is not as important, but is 50. 50 is when the FMLA and other federal laws kick in. And so 1, 15, 50 are the things you need to be thinking about in terms of as you start to scale your company.
So when I got to start putting those what are they up on the wall? You got to start putting the federal guidelines or whatever for
the OSHA stuff,
OSHA stuff, and things of that nature up on the wall. Does that happen at 15, or is when the federals kick in, or is that?
So OSHA's earlier. There's a general obligation on all employers to maintain a healthy and safe work environment under OSHA. When it comes to the discrimination laws, which are Title VII, that's sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, all those, that kicks in at 15. Disability kicks in at 15. Pregnancy kicks in at 15. Now, I want to be clear. I like to tell people, visualize it like this. There's the red zone, there's the yellow zone, and there's the green zone, right? You have, like with kids, you train your kids in terms of like red light, green light, yellow light in terms of behavior. It's the same thing with employment law, right? If you're in the red zone, which is that you are discriminating against someone on the basis of a protected characteristic, you got a serious problem. You should not be in the red zone, right? Where we like to really educate, right, exactly. Where you like to really educate is in that yellow zone, right? Which is going to be the things that are borderline that open you up to liabilities, but aren't necessarily illegal in and of themselves. And then there's the green zone, which is the doing good and having a good workplace culture. If you are under 15 employees, don't think that you should not be thinking about discrimination laws and all these things. Well, I'm not covered by the federal law, so I don't need to think about. Well, you also have a moral obligation. That's a legal risk, and that's not the issue over here. You have a moral obligation, in my view, as a corporation, to make sure that you are promoting a healthy, safe work environment, free of discrimination, free of harassment, where people can come to work, feel good, feel safe, and frankly, it's in your business interest, because when people,
it is,
exactly,
you be a good leader. And you need to have an environment that people want to come work to, and want to come work for you, or want to come work here with this business or in this operation. That's very important, because right now we know most small business owners have an issue with either attracting and retaining employees.
Yes.
And so it's best practices, and you should be working on that from the very get-go. And again, that's leadership. That'll be on another show coming up. But it's hard though, because okay, let's say I own a restaurant, okay, and I have people come, my employees come in, and I have to deal with, their attitude, for the day, and maybe they just got in a big fight with somebody, their the girlfriend or their boyfriend or their spouse or whatnot, and they're pissed off, and they're coming into work with a bad attitude, or it could be any other thing that could be going on that people bring with them to work. And as an owner, as a manager, even as somebody who is in a leadership role, you got to know how to play that game.
Correct, and that's something that is more important, in my view, than legal compliance. You want to create an environment, a workplace environment, where people are going to feel safe, and you are going to have a more productive and better work environment if your employees feel that you have their back, feel safe, feel emotionally safe, feel that you care about them, and that you're not someone who is going to treat them wrong. So treating your employees right is actually a good business decision.
Good practice to get into. We were talking about that before the show, but yes, let's do this.
We're at the bottom of the hour. Just wanted to make sure that everybody knows you're listening to 21.6 Net. This is Innovative Strategies with Bill HAASE. Today we've got Josh Joel from Stanton Law LLC on with us. He is, he's a business lawyer guy. Right, he does a lot of other employment lawyer guy. Right,
Mom's happy about that.
Mom is very happy about that. Of course, you can find him at joshjoel.com. It'll take you right to his website. Let me throw that up on the screen. There it is. That's in the practices area. So there's a couple of 4 things that you can find that Josh does, which is absolutely cool. Now, we also want to say that come back at 12:30 today for questions you never thought you could ask in church. They're going to have an exorcist guy, a guy who does exorcists,
Like
which is
twisting heads and everything.
yeah, I guess. So kind of a fun midday show on Wednesday here. But
When do you have all the plastic laid out?
yeah, and Bill, if people want to get in touch with you, they can email you at bill@billhaase.com. That's Bill@Bill HAASE.com. And if you have questions for anybody, you can send them to us. You can put them in the chat box here online as we're live right now on YouTube and Facebook. And or if you want to be part of the show, email Bill and let him know. We'd love to have you and your expertise on.
Absolutely. And Josh, what's a great way to get a hold of you? If we
as you mentioned, joshjoel.com will redirect you to my firm bio and my page. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Check it out there. I'm very active on LinkedIn, put a lot of content out, educational content. And so just search me out on LinkedIn at Josh Joel Stanton Law. And certainly StantonLawLLC.com is our firm website. And that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. I want to get back to a little something that Sally brought up too.
Can we talk about exorcism? Because that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Like that's like way more interesting than talking to a lawyer.
It's going to be interesting.
Well, Josh, I'm trying to make this interesting, please. But seriously, exorcism. I might have to stick around for that one. But maybe the other side of the green room. But I want to get back to what Sally was talking about. Background checks.
Yeah.
Important, not important. Should I do it, not do it? I'm just hiring one person. Do I really need to do a background check? I've known them for a while. They're good people.
Yeah, that's a great question. So background checks are not necessary. And a lot depends on the nature of the job that you're applying for and the pool of applicants that you're going into. If you're hiring your friend, you know them, you've known them your whole life, then okay, you don't need to do a background check. But if you are just doing a generalized hiring from out there in the world, there's no real reason not to do a background check, and as long as you're handling it appropriately and handling it well. Now, the risks from a social standpoint or a cultural standpoint, policy standpoint with respect to background checks that you hear about a lot in the news, and I got a great story on this, but is the fact that sometimes background checks do weed out people who otherwise would be qualified for the job and have done repentance and have put their lives back together, and convicted felons and these kind of things are kind of weeded out of the job market and are left kind of hopeless because of background checks. So there are federal and state protections with respect to how you can and can't use background checks in the hiring process. The most important one being, and again, you have to check your state laws. We won't talk state here because a lot of states are represented. But the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which basically says that if you are going to disqualify someone based upon a background check, first of all, you have to get consent from them to do the background check. So that's part of the hiring process. Make sure you get the appropriate consents from them and outsource the background check to a credit reporting agency, a background check agency. But if you choose to not hire someone as a result of a background check, this is the most important thing to know about it, in my view, is that you have federal obligations to give them notice. You have to send them a specific letter, basically telling them that you are planning to disqualify them on the basis of something that has come up in the background check, and give them a reasonable amount of time, which is generally 5 to 7 days, to go and dispute the basis of that background check with the credit reporting or background check agency that provided that information to them. In addition to that, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that's fair. Give them time to respond and everything, because things can come up in the background that were maybe even 20, 30 years ago, depending upon how old you are and where you're going and whatnot. But you know what? You don't always know the person. You just don't. And I may have known somebody all my life, but there are things that I probably got sheltered from that I may not have known.
Correct.
That come out later on. And then you have, you just don't know what type of person that, but maybe you haven't been in touch with them for 8 years since college or something.
Yeah. Well, you do have to bear in mind that certain state laws, certainly California, I believe Illinois might be the same, and other states have laws that do not allow you to consider certain convictions after a certain amount of time. So the most is California, 7 years. you can't consider even a felony conviction that was more than 7 years old. And so you got to be very careful about knowing that, as well as recognizing that under the federal discrimination rules, there are certain protected classes that can be discriminated against based upon the fact that that group might have more likelihood to have certain convictions that are in their records and things like that. And so the EEOC actually does look at sometimes people's practices and procedures with respect to how they use background checks and potentially weed out certain protected classes as a result. But I would love to share a really cool story, which is like a redemption story. That's one of my favorite, because a lot of times you think about business side employment lawyers as being the bad guys, which is the guy that is out to get the employees. I got a call a few months ago from a client of mine who, without revealing any specific client information, I'll change some of the facts as well. But basically, the client was hiring someone for a position in finance within their company, an in-house finance position. Background check comes back and says that they had a criminal conviction at young age, 20-something years old, for check fraud. Right now, on the face, you're like, hey man, I cannot hire someone for an accounting position who has a history of check fraud, right? That's bad. Right. Okay. So they reached out to me and said, well, I know that the law requires me to give certain notices. Can you help me work through that process? It was an amazing story because, making it very short, they sent out the notice, gave them 5 days to dispute that. And they actually got the story from this individual who informed them that when she was a young single mom, she was basically scammed by a friend. You mentioned before, you don't always know people.
Right.
The friend had befriended her, and they had been helping an elderly lady, visiting her every week. And this friend had signed her name, the young woman who had applied for the job, the applicant, onto fraudulent checks after this individual that they had been seeing every week passed away. And the sheriff knocked on her door, arrested her, the applicant, 25 years ago for check fraud. And she went to court, and her public defender told her that if you plead guilty to this felony, right, you are looking at maybe 6 years of probation. If you plead not guilty, you might sit in jail for 10 years. She was terrified that she was going to lose her child. And so she pled guilty to a felony she did not commit. And
not one of those good lawyers.
Right. And so that exactly. And right. Well, I don't know if that lawyer made the right decision there or not. I think it was a reasonable point to make to her. She was she was terrified to lose her child. She pled guilty to the felony, and this stuck with her for the rest of her life. 25 years later, comes up on her background check. And because the federal law is designed to protect people from who have redeemed themselves, she was able to explain herself, and we were able to do the appropriate checks to make sure that her story checked out. And she is now a very successfully implanted accountant within that company. And because of those federal protections, the employee was actually helped, and the company ended up with an excellent accountant that because they reached out to a lawyer, their lawyer, to see how to fire the person or not hire the person as a result of this conviction, they end up hiring her and having a much better result. So that's the kind of thing that gives me a lot of pleasure in the work that I do, that this person was given a second chance.
And I love that. I love that story. And there's many like that out there, because and sometimes as an employee, you don't always know when you're getting taken advantage of.
Right. Yes.
Right. You can wind up getting yourself in a position that you had no idea. And that can, be trouble on down the line. So it can go back and forth many different ways. We are talking at a 30,000 square foot, 30,000 foot level here. Yeah. We're not giving out advice. We're just bringing up scenarios and wonderful stories like that. And here we are showing the page here for Stanton Law.
Yeah, I just don't know. They can't see that. I can. So
you can. I can see it.
Yeah, you can. Yeah,
but so we're not giving out specific advice here. We're just looking at different scenarios and different things that as a business owner, from that startup all the way up to, like I say, hiring that 500th employee, things to think about, things to consider.
Here's
things to know.
Let's take it from a small business owner's point of view.
Sure.
How far does ignorance get me in the court of law? So in other words, let's say that I own a plumbing company.
I like this question.
Right. So, I own a plumbing company, and it's me and my truck, and then I'm expanding, and I get a couple other guys in, and I don't have an employee handbook or whatever. It's just like, hey, you guys are plumbers. Here we go. We got this. I'll W-2 you because my accountant says to W-2 you, and I don't know. So how far does ignorance get a small business owner?
Ignorance, oh God, ignorance gets a small business owner as far as when the very first disgruntled employee comes back at you. And so you can be as ignorant as you want to be until something goes wrong. And generally, it's going to be an angry employee. The most common scenario, for example, is going to be someone that you terminate because they suck at their job. And that's 9 times out of 10 why you terminate someone is because they suck, right? And so you terminate that person. And next thing you know, a month later, you get a knock on your door or an email or whatever from a Department of Labor investigator saying that you did not pay overtime appropriately. And you're like, what do you mean? All my employees were salaried. What do you mean? I was such a nice guy and I paid them so well. It doesn't matter if you didn't comply with the law in the way and the manner in which you paid them, then you're going to be slammed by the Department of Labor. So that's an example of the very first time it's going to get you as far as the very first problem, as far as the first disgruntled employee.
So the old adage that if I didn't knowingly and willingly break the law, how can I be held responsible for it?
Yeah,
that doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Where the only thing that does, it potentially will reduce a little bit some of your liability because of statutes of limitations and stuff like that. But no, it doesn't get you anywhere. So ignorance is not a defense to any of the federal employment laws or any of the state employment laws, or frankly to any law. Ignorance is never a defense, and that's why it's so important to educate yourself. Which is why it's so important to follow Josh Joel on LinkedIn. That way you can be educated.
Exactly.
I just
so and know kind of the pitfalls that you're facing. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to address and close every one of those risks immediately, but it's certainly you have to know what the risks are so that when the time comes, you'll be able to address them and not deal with that. But I'll tell you, it's a heck of a lot more expensive to deal with a problem than to close the problem before it starts. So,
and as a small business owner, you're getting this.
Yeah,
it's more expensive to do things after whatever hits the fan than to get set up properly and do things from the get-go.
Yeah,
it is, whether it's a CPA, whether it's a lawyer or whatnot. And I also want to point out, folks, that we're not going to get everything in today about the legal side of owning a business, running a business, bringing on employees and stuff like that. So I had asked Josh if he would be so kind as we'll do a series and we'll bring up different subjects and talk about different things. But I completely agree with you. You need to hook up with him on LinkedIn to get all these articles that he does, because they are wonderful. And we also say here on this show that knowledge gives you options and options gives you freedom. That came from one of my guests, Michelle Prather, and I love it so much. I borrowed it from her, and notice I didn't say stole it from her.
Yeah. Right.
But it's true, and knowledge, knowledge is power, right? But knowledge gives you options. Options gives you freedom to do what you feel is best.
Alex, good morning. Hey, just on another note, you are involved with a podcast. Been there, do this podcast.
Correct.
What's that about? And let's chat.
Oh yeah. So the podcast is fun. So I'm actually in the process of relaunching my podcast and rebranding. So the Been There, Do This is my rebranded podcast. Before it was just the boring Stanton Law podcast. And now I've in the next week or two, actually, you will see all the new collateral coming out for the Been There, Do This podcast, which is the rebranded Stanton Law podcast. And my goal there is what I do is I bring on entrepreneurs who are kind of down the road, who have been very successful, who have some sort of passion that drives their business, and lessons learned to tell their stories, tell their better business stories is the way I like to call it, about the passions that drive their business and what they did right and what they did wrong, so that the younger entrepreneur, the newer entrepreneur, the person just starting out can really learn from those who've been along the way and are 2 steps ahead. And so that's the goal. And it's been great. I kind of tried a bunch of different things with the podcast, and I found that this really resonates with people, and that will be my focus going forward, starting really next week.
It falls right in line with what we're doing here, kind of side by side. And I love that. Do you have a specific day and time that you're going to be podcasting?
Yeah, so I generally release the podcasts. They're not live, but I do release them every Tuesday. Okay. And so they generally will release at midnight on Tuesdays every second week, and building out my new production schedule, and we'll be starting to release the new rebranded podcast within the next week or two.
That's awesome. And what platforms are those on? Apple, Spotify, where are you at?
as they say, wherever you get your podcasts. Yes, it's Spotify, Apple Podcast. It's hosted on Anchor, which is through Spotify. I believe it's in the Google Podcasts. I don't know all the different things, but the production, the great and amazing production people take care of that.
We should have our production people talk to him. Maybe there's a spot here on 21.
Is it National Production Person Day?
It could be.
Yeah, National Pizza Day.
Pizza Day.
Let me get you a pizza. My treat.
Maybe
personal pan size.
Maybe we'll get him in front of the 21.6 The Net audience.
Yeah, but there is, you know what, Josh, you're right. I got into this last July, I believe, was our first show, end of June, beginning of July, and it's amazing how much you learn in a short period of time, and how much you have to learn in a short period of time if you're going to be involved in podcasts and internet radio shows. It is never ever ending. And, I'm going to have some guests on here that'll help folks navigate that, because I think we're up to about 2 million podcasters now, as the last number I heard in the past week or two. So there's a lot of folks out there podcasting.
Yeah.
But we all can't be Joe Rogan.
That's right. That's exactly right. For better, for worse.
Yeah.
I don't know if we all
want to be.
I was going to say, I don't know if you want to step into that one today.
You know what? Not. If I were on Spotify up there with him at that level, I'm not going to argue.
Yeah.
I'll share it. I'll share the stage with him.
He's doing what he's supposed to. He's doing what he's supposed to do. We love you, Joe. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, we do, and everybody is welcome to their own opinion.
That's right.
As long as we all walk away as friends.
That's right.
Which is kind of how our group got started.
It is.
Several years ago.
Yeah, truthfully.
But we had a special group. But we'll digress.
Yeah.
We still have about 10, 12 minutes left here. Was there a particular subject that you really feel is so important from the get-go, or you feel that the timing of somebody to come out and see you, is there something you feel is the most important for somebody starting up a business?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I think that going back to Sally's question earlier, I believe it was Sally, talking about the different things that people should be thinking about. The one other thing that I mentioned briefly that I really, really want people to hear is that ultimately going to a lawyer is about protecting yourself and protecting your business, protecting your business interests. And I mentioned before about the fact that when you start bringing people in and start growing, you certainly want to make sure that you are doing what it takes to protect yourselves. And an employment relationship, as much as you love the person, at the end of the day, it's a business relationship, and that's very important to remember.
And it should stay that way.
And it should stay. And as much as you like each other, and as much you have to recognize that underpinning that and your partnerships is a business relationship, and you have to keep that in mind, which means you have to be focused on protecting yourself first. And as a business owner, one thing that I see a lot of people make mistakes on when they're starting out, and this is just like a soapbox of mine because I see the problems of this so many times, is when they get into a partnership with someone, there's a honeymoon period in the very beginning where you guys just love each other, right? And and it's great, and everything's wonderful, and everything's fantastic, and all good and well, and therefore you're not thinking about the fact that you should probably get your partnership agreements in place and your governance agreements in place in order to define what's going to happen when things are not so pretty, like a prenup, right? When things start falling apart. So that's something that
buy-sell agreement too. You need things like that in place.
So, you want to make sure everything's in place. As much as an optimistic personality and a passionate personality as I am, my job is really to help people see what can go wrong, and to find ways to mitigate that and to make that less of a problem early and a lot cheaper. It's going to, and your business is going to fall apart if you don't have those appropriate, for example, a dispute resolution. How are you going to resolve fights that are between you guys when they come up? Because they will come up. Any human who's working with another human is going to have disagreements. And, people say, well, it's a 50-50 partnership. Bad idea, right? You got to make sure in a 50-50 that you're putting those in place. But people aren't thinking about that because they love each other.
You're right.
Just like a couple's not thinking about it when, thinking about divorce when they get married.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's a great point.
Had I been smart, I would have had key man insurance.
Yes, had you been smart, you would have had a buy-sell agreement, not a key manager. Well, you could have had both. Could have both, and you could have done both through me. But
good record,
whatever.
Yeah, I got a quick question, because not all small business owners are solopreneurs, right? So a lot of small business owners are franchisees, right?
Yeah.
So really, as you're looking at expanding, there may be no need to recreate the wheel, but the wheel may not necessarily fit, right? So I would imagine that a franchise has guidelines or a
They've already
handbook
got
or
things in
something,
place,
right?
Correct.
typically.
But they should still probably visit with someone like you, Joel, because it may not fit in, Paducah, Illinois.
Well, you still have to understand it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So with the franchise agreements, that's a little bit tricky because most of those situations, it's take it or leave it. These are our terms, right? And this is the deal. And this is with many different relationships that you're in. But at the end of the day, and when you sign that agreement, there's a little line at the end that says, "I've had the opportunity to review this agreement with a lawyer. I am not being coerced or whatever into signing this agreement, and et cetera." They put that in there because they know that those are one-sided contracts when it comes to the negotiating position of both parties. And so in those situations, absolutely, it is worth knowing and understanding what you're getting into and what the risks are. So having a lawyer review it with you so you can understand it, and a good lawyer will do that for you for a flat fee usually, and sit and go through that agreement with you so you understand what you're getting into and you can make the best informed decision.
Sure.
Is really, really important. I can't tell you how many people I know who I've worked with when things have gone wrong who never bothered to bring even things like mergers and acquisitions, never bothered to bring the asset purchase agreements that they were presented with or anything like that to a lawyer to go over, because no one's going to change it anyway. I can't make any red lines to this agreement, but you still need to understand what you're getting into and maybe recognize that you're taking on risk that might not be a good business risk for you to take on, because again, the person who wrote that contract is also the franchisor, is also looking out for their best interest, and they are not looking out for yours.
Well, and you got to look at something. You got to look at, and good morning, Alex. Thanks for chiming in here today from Chicago. But you want to look at something. So I had a friend who had a restaurant, and he was leasing out the space. He did not have the proper lawyer to go over the contract for leasing out the space. And when the air conditioner on the roof went out, he found out he was liable for that $20,000 replacement.
Yeah.
That he did not know of. That air conditioning unit had been up there for 30 years before he even started leasing the place.
Right.
But he wound up being 100% liable for that. So there's even little things can make a big difference, and little things can take a big business down.
Well,
100%. Indemnification provisions, these kind of things can really take you down. Another very common one that I've seen a good number of times is when a person wants to sell his business. And so what they'll often do, let's say venture capital wants to come in and buy a medical practice. This is what I deal with quite often. They will present you with the agreements, and in those agreements, they will include an employment agreement where the doctor or whoever or the whatever the medical practitioner is will stay on for, let's say, 3 years as an employee of the venture capital, so that he can then slowly transition out. And oftentimes what happens there is that he doesn't bother to look at the fact that those agreements, that first of all, he's not going to be the boss anymore of that practice. Someone else is going to be his employer. He has to recognize that. And those agreements that he now signs often have restrictive covenants and non-competes that will not allow him to go somewhere else nearby if things don't go well, and they won't go well. Right? That's the bottom line.
Good point. So I have a question. Non-competes.
Sure.
Illinois has non-competes. Now, when I was in the trading pits for years, everybody always had you sign a non-compete because we're in one pit. I was in Eurodollars, world's largest trading pit. If I leave this group or this company and I'm going to go over to this company or this group, I don't have a choice. It's not like I can, go to a different world or, I'm that's my world, and I only have so many options. And if I'm not happy and I want to make that move, now as I understood, a lot of us signed non-competes back in those days. I don't believe any of them ever held up. So I'm not sure the validity of them.
This is a huge. You're touching on the quintessential or the most profound issue with respect to non-competes is the fact that they are a restraint of trade. It means it's restraining the employee from going to work somewhere else in the free market. And the trend in this country over the last 15 years, and this is something we hear all the time, because the people, no offense, but the people your age, right, are often coming to us and saying, non-competes are not enforceable, right? And our answer is wrong, right? And so that's something that's you got to get that out of your head, because the trend in this country over the last 15 years, whether through statute or through the law, is that non-competes, non-solicitation agreements, and these things, the general principle is that they are enforceable to the extent that they protect the legitimate business needs of the company that's putting them in place, and the company's customers' relationships and their sales and their revenue are legitimate business interests. And therefore, you should come from the default presumption that a non-compete is going to be enforceable, and therefore should be looked at by an attorney before you sign it. And there are many exceptions to that. And there are many exclusions to that, but you're not going to know them. And I think the default should be this is enforceable unless, as opposed to what 20 years ago might have been, which is this is not enforceable unless.
So in other words, just because I believe something to be this way, you better protect your baby.
Yes,
as we're naming this show, and find out, because as strong as you may believe in something, that doesn't make it true.
It does not make it true, and just the opposite. And here in that situation, we're talking about a non-compete, and the employee, your baby is you, right? Is your skills and your ability to be marketable in the marketplace, and therefore 100%. You have to again goes back to education, and that's why I say on those I cannot emphasize this more. Default, it's enforceable unless, and therefore have a lawyer look at it before you sign it. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and it's going to save you a lot of heartache.
Quick question.
Sure.
Why is all that legalese in fine print? You notice you always see
well, there's a lot of it.
The
They
legal
just wanna make sure it
aspects
gets on the page.
are always, even I have to use it, right? In my world, I have to use it in the bottom. It's like super fine print,
Yeah. So
this is not legal advice. This is not accounting advice.
Yeah. So you're going to give me I'm going to give you a very cynical answer to that. There's two very cynical answers to that. One is that if lawyers make it look really dense and really small print, they can charge more money for it. And two is the reality is that those will be enforceable, and let's just face the music. People don't want you to read them, and therefore they make it hard for you to read.
And nobody does.
And no one reads it, and yet the law is generally that if you sign something, it's assumed that you have read it and it is enforceable on you.
Yes.
That's kind of being whittled away at, especially with the advent of the terms and conditions online and the accept, decline things online, and how that all those things play out. There's all sorts of legal talk that could be we could do a whole session just on that.
Yeah, we will, because you go even if you go to buy a house and you go to closing and you got 300 pages. Here, sign here. Here, put your initials here. Sign here. Initials here. And boom, 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 boom through the page. You're not reading any of it.
That's right. And I'll tell you right now that if you're hiring a lawyer, I believe very strongly that your lawyer should never present to you a document that you cannot understand in plain English. A good lawyer is not a lawyer who has whereases, therefores, and herein's, and wherefores, and definitions, and bloody, 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 the legal babble, mumbo, jumbo, jabber, jabber that no one likes, right? The contract should be something that you, as the lawyer's client, understands exactly what you're being presented with, and it should be in plain English.
I agree with that, and that's how I run my business when I work with people, when talk about insurance, long-term care, annuities, or other investments or whatever. You have to understand what this is all about, the reason for it, what's in it, how to work it, how to use it, and everything. Even though most likely they're going to forget in a week.
That's true.
Typically.
Yeah.
But you have to explain it so that people understand it, and you have to I always make sure that they don't look at me as like a deer staring in headlights, and saying, yeah, I get it, when I know you don't.
Right.
We got to take that extra step that I know you take, that I take, and that all my guests that come on here take, because that is a requirement of the kind of person you are for me to have you on the show. But it's been a privilege and a pleasure to have you on, and we're going to look forward to having you back to talk a little bit more in depth about different aspects of what you do, and different things that business owners need to think about, because there's a lot to it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you bringing me on, and I appreciate your passion and your desire to really help the entrepreneurs out there do better business. So it's been great.
Well, together, maybe we can help all these folks grow, be successful.
Right. That's it.
All
right, that's
what
it.
we're here for. Thank
We're
you.
on the backside
Appreciate it
of it. Thank you, Josh Joel, for joining us here at Innovative Strategies. Thanks for getting caught in the net. Come back at 12:30 for a live show. Questions you never thought you could ask in church, where they're going to have an exorcist on today.
Don't you have a new show coming on at noon?
At noon is It's Your Move, brought to you. That's Kent Jones, the founder of the company. Just his take on some things, and special musical guest, Montana Suede. So
Wow.
yeah, at noon. Really good.
Outstanding.
All right. For all of us here at
Outstanding.
21.6 The Net, be good and be good to each other. Thanks, Josh Joel. Check him
Thanks,
out.
Josh.
Link in with him at Josh Joel. I did. All I got to put in is Josh Joel, and he's the number one guy there. So hook up with him on LinkedIn. Great stuff. Follow his podcast at www.beentheredothispodcast.com as well. For all of us here, enjoy.
Appreciate it.
Outstanding. Thanks so much for listening in today. We'll see you again next week.